So my name's Andy Bass, my firm is Bass Klusker Consulting, and I work really on two things. One is strategy that will be supported. A lot of people formulate strategies, put them into ring binders, put them on the shelf, and a year later they look at them again and go, oh, that would have been good. But I work on helping people to produce strategies with their people, with their customers, that will actually make a difference. And the second thing is working with individuals to help them to make career transforming contributions to their businesses. And it's not just creative businesses, all businesses are subject to limits. And if you think back over the history of business, it's impossible to find businesses that didn't eventually top out for one reason or another. So you get this kind of an S-curve. If your business takes off, then you have a boost phase, but then, as you say, these limits will come in, and there can be external factors and there can be internal factors. Some of the typical categories externally, obviously competition, but also trends. You may be doing something that's really cool, but of course, if your boost has been caused by being fashionable, you're very vulnerable then, because people who like fashionable stuff are going to move on to the next thing. You've got to be thinking about what that next thing will be. There are also internal factors. The classic one with entrepreneurs is they have lots of energy and they may be a little bit less than systematic, but they draw people with their enthusiasm. But there comes a point when the business has got to be more systematic. You need to get your finances tidied up and so forth. You'll have different functions. If the entrepreneur can't let the people who run those functions do their job and they become a bottleneck for decision making, then you can fall behind. So shifting into a more organisational, professionalised kind of structure is another thing that can cause people to either level off, or if they realise this, and this is what you have to encourage people to do, we've got this up curve, what's the next S curve? If you're a very fashionable business, what's the next trend? If it's a matter of adapting to just needing to be more organised, what are the systems that you need? Are you starting to learn about those things in advance so that you're going to have them ready when you need them? Okay, there's a really nice way of doing it, and in fact the trick is to think not just about the next curve, but to think of three curves in one. And this idea originally comes from McKinsey, and it was used for working with very large businesses, and I found it to be great with large businesses, but it also works really well with startups, even coaching individuals, very flexible. And the idea is that we operate on three horizons. A business operates on three horizons, and you think about all of these at the same time. So the first one is about profit and cash. This is the current lifeblood of the business, and it has to be run efficiently. The second horizon is about growth, and here what you're focusing on is getting some sales in the next area. Much less worried at this time about profit and cash generation. And then the third horizon is about options for the future. And what I'm thinking about here is looking for trends. Thinking about if you're thinking about exporting, then you might go, okay, how am I going to do that? What do I need to find out? Should I go and meet some people, make some contacts, make some relationships? I might do some of these options and I might well not do others, but I'm getting ready now to think about the future. This one is all about running a tight ship, basically. So if you're a startup and you've got some business, the next thing you do is you kind of systematize and you tighten things up and you watch the pennies and so on, and you collect your cash quickly and all of those disciplines that people need to do. That's what's going on here. The growth horizon is all about getting more sales. You're not so worried yet about how profitable that is, because once you've got the sales, then that becomes the new profit and cash concern, and then you clean it up. Let me give you a sort of a classic example, which was a startup. When Honda first went into the United States in the 1960s, they gave the 2 or 3 guys they sent over their mission, which is try and sell something to Americans. And that was it. And they thought they were going to sell superbikes, or the biggest bikes that they had. In the end, they couldn't sell big motorbikes, but they took a couple of those little Cub scooters around just to run errands for themselves. And some Americans would see these and said, hey, where can I get one of those funny little scooters from? And they realized we can sell the Cubs. And this is a perfect example of going out just trying to get some sales in something new, and then when you find out where you get those sales, you tidy the thing up and it becomes your next profit and cash business. So that's the growth horizon. An example from the third horizon, let's take someone like a Google who might be looking around and saying, there's an interesting Indian software company with 2 or 3 really good programmers, they've got some interesting algorithms. Why don't we take a small stake in that business and then we'll do one of 2 things. If we think we can use it in the future, we'll buy the rest of the business. If not, then we'll sell the rest of that business. But it's keeping options open that could become the basis of products where you can grow some real sales, which will then become your cash cows in the future. The important thing about this kind of thinking is that all of these have to have the same start point. In other words, you don't grow this business and when it's finished, then do this one and then do this one. In any one period of time, you've got to be putting effort in on all three of these at one time, keeping those three plates spinning. Say we are healthy on all three horizons. So we're generating profit and cash, we're growing our next businesses, and we've got a good handle on our options for the future. Obviously the worst one is that all three of those are wiped out, so we won't spend any time on this one. These other six are really interesting because if you get a sense of where you're at, and it's a great thing to discuss with your team, then you can decide what you're going to do next, because the idea is to get to here. But every business gets knocked off, and the trick is it doesn't matter that you get knocked off. What matters is that you know it, and then you plan your way back and you kind of keep a balance. Now these first two patterns, cross, cross, tick, and cross, tick, cross, are quite common in a new startup because you're not going to be generating any cash to start with, and you may just have an idea, and that idea then you start to grow some sales, and obviously the next point is that that then becomes your initial business. These four are probably the most important ones to think about in terms of diagnosing problems. And when I work with clients or with groups, I'm going to say to them, discuss which one of these patterns you think makes the most sense to you. Now, here is a business that might have got itself started, or it might just be a business that's a one-trick pony. And it's not thinking about that first S-curve, and it's certainly not thinking beyond that. So it's going to have its run, it's going to top out, and then it's going to be finished. Clearly that's very dangerous. There's no kind of sustainable growth in that. This one is an interesting pattern that's very different. This one was called by the guys that first came up with it, losing the right to grow. And you quite often will see this if you've got someone who's a real enthusiast. And again, entrepreneurs are enthusiasts very often. They get a business going, and then they're on to the next thing, and they kind of neglect the current business, and they're really excited about the next things that they're going to do. So this is a business that's kind of cutting its own feet out from under it. And the solution here is you've got to get back to basics. This one we might call no plan B, okay? So it's doing okay now, they've got some growth plans, but if those growth plans don't work, then they're finished. And it's kind of the same as the S-curve story that we started with, but not quite as severe as this very complacent one. And I see this one a lot, which is why I saved it for the last. This is a business that's doing well now, but they're so busy with day-to-day, driven by their inbox, driven by messages, that they know they need to get to something else. They've got ideas, but they can't bridge the gap. I think there are a couple of final thoughts. One of them is that it's inevitable in almost every business, even really quite big businesses, that your emphasis on serving your customer and being good operationally means that it's very hard to get out of that first horizon. And the three horizons is a great way to introduce strategic thinking, because it keeps you honest. If you draw those three horizons up every quarter and say, how did we do last quarter? What are we going to do next quarter? I've got clients who use that as a standing agenda item in their management teams. The other thing to say, and again, the three horizons idea, that basic S-curve idea brings it home, is that one product or service idea is not the same thing as a business. There's more to it. To turn your product or service into an investable business, you have to put the systems in, of course. You have to be able to tell a story to an investor that they're going to see that there's continuity.